welcome to Turtle Tracks Podcast. This is your host, Brian VanHooker, and I'm here with Joey McCormick, Design Supervisor on Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Joey, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, Joey, you've worked on a lot of shows, Teen Titan, Camp Coral. So Rick and Morty, which I'm a huge fan of.
Nice.
What brought you to Turtles, and were you a Turtle fan before getting the assignment?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge turtle fan. Like it's one of those things like I don't even remember not being a turtle fan. There's like you know
Right.
how sometimes like there's a picture somewhere floating around, or it might just be a memory. I don't know, but it's of like me as a like I think my third birthday with a Donatello cake, and like that's ingrained in my memory. But yeah, so I've always loved turtles. My parents definitely let me watch the movies when I was too young, and
Sure.
yeah, so I've always like anytime you hear like even like rumors of a Ninja Turtle show pop up, I'm like, "Ugh, love to work on that." And this time I got really lucky because I worked with Andrea on Unikitty. I did some freelance for her near the end of her run on Unikitty. And after that, like I really enjoyed working with her. And after that, we kept having misconnections on like Cuphead. I think she wanted like reached out to me to work on at one point, but I was already working at Netflix, so it couldn't work out. And then she just shot me a DM on Instagram, was like, "Hey, are you available?" And I'm like, and I saw on her Instagram, I think she had like a turtle and a slice of pizza on like what she's next to, like Nickelodeon. I was like, please, please. And yeah, I was like, what's up? Like what's going on? Yeah, so she had me come on and do a little bit of biz dev for the show. And then I got the offer and I was like, I'm in. Yeah, like 100%, I'm down.
I should point out that's Andrea Fernandez, who I had on this podcast not long ago, and she's really awesome to talk to. So I really just it's so interesting to me to see how like the movie, which had such a distinct look, got faithfully translated 2D. I mean, what was your first visual development assignment for this show?
It was a shot of an alleyway. And the assignment was basically like it was awesome because the movie hadn't come out yet. And like I
Oh,
think the trailer had been out, and that trailer for Mutant Mayhem, like watching, I was like, this is so sick. Like I was so like hyped on it that so when I got the assignment to figure out what the alleyway worked, I also like chatted about the viz dev style of the show and got a bunch of the viz dev for the show or for the movie, not the show, and got to look at that and see how they were approaching things, which we've all seen now, but at the time we hadn't seen anything about
oh,
it. So that was so exciting to get to kind of sneak peek at that. And basically the idea was how do like these viz dev pieces are amazing. Let's just like make that the backgrounds. Like let's try and adapt that into the background style of the show. And so yeah, I did this one alleyway that then Mark, I think that was one of his first paintings he did. Maybe I don't know if it was like I think it was previs maybe he was doing on it, or maybe it was when he was working on the show. But yeah, it was like this awesome like, oh cool, we can do it. We can make this look like the movie.
I'm curious what you see like what. So the movie has a very unique look. I'm curious what was unique about it in translating the backgrounds. Like, what's different about that movie that maybe the casual observer wouldn't notice at first?
Well, like every now and then there seems to be like a jump in 3D animation on what's happening. And as 3D animation advances, I think you kind of hit like a you hit like a okay, this is what's happening, this is where the style trends are going, and then something changes. And I remember like when I was in college, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs came out. And that was that to me looked like a big change in the industry because everything was very going Pixar styley, very kind of that capture, very like I don't know, like early Pixar films was like kind of the pinnacle. And then Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs came out, and I don't think a lot of people give that as much credit, but that like I'd never seen rigs work that way, I'd never seen 3D animation work that way. And I think like everyone felt that when Spider-Verse came out, where it was like you're getting further away from this very traditional 3D look that's been kind of dominating, I guess, the industry with like, your Shreks and your cars and your things like that. And then
What's
I
the
feel like
difference? Like, I
oh,
don't
sorry.
know Cloudy that well. Like, what? I mean, I've seen it. I think once. What was the difference between what Pixar was doing early on and what they did with that? I'm
So
curious.
at the same time as Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs came out, Up came out. And I think those are like Up, amazing film, very stylized proportion, character designs, but movement felt very grounded in real life. As opposed to Cloudy, which felt like it came from I want to say like UPA era of animation, or maybe not that far back, but like
Oh, there's like a spaghetti arm Warner Brothers kind of sensibility.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
finally getting 3D spaghetti arms. There's at one point they go into like a Jello house and everything's bouncing and moving. The characters are stretching and squashing in ways that I mean at the time I was like only 2D can do that. Like 3D can't do this. And I think that evolves even more so into Hotel Transylvania, where you get a lot of that, where you're now getting like held poses happening, you're getting like crazy shocked faces happening. Yeah, like you were saying, the Tex Avery style, I think was really
Yeah. Okay.
kind of being interjected into 3D animation, at least to me for the first time. I think there were a lot of like short films and indie films, and like I think Andrea mentioned it before, like the inspiration for Turtles animation being like French short films, and I think a lot of them were doing it. But as far as a feature went, I don't know if I'd seen anything like that. And Sony kind of continued to champion that and into Spider-Verse. Like they did so they did Cloud of the Chance of Meatballs 1, 2, they did the Hotel Transylvania movies, they did the Emoji movie, which again, like not everyone's favorite, but they did some pretty cool stylized stuff. And then that went into Spider-Verse. And I think Spider-Verse was this really big jump in
Yeah.
like, oh, cool, look what we can really do now. And I think that Mutant Mayhem kind of went um, in that direction, but they made a pivot where instead of like, we're going to make this like comic books, we're going to do Zipatone, we're going to do these things, we're going to like make this rough and sketchy, like the original TMNT comics, which were very rough, very sketchy. And I think like that's something I feel like a lot of artists would have loved to do, but I don't think anyone was going to be like, yeah, make a feature film based on this huge IP in this really like new weird style, like just that's like characters are ugly and like not everything is perfect and clean and you're going to have like broken environments. Like I'm just super like excited that that got to happen.
I mean, so many people have heard compare Mutant Mayhem to Spider-Verse, and obviously, I think Mutant Mayhem does follow in the tracks of Spider-Verse. I think Spider-Verse kind of was the next leap, but
Yeah,
like the sketchy kind of development art thing was definitely its own take. Like, I mean,
totally.
so many movies where I've seen where the development art is way cooler than the thing that ends up on the screen.
Yeah.
It's cool to kind of see that. Like, I interviewed Woodrow White, who
Oh, nice. His
yeah.
work's amazing.
Oh, good. And like his Bebop and Rocksteady, you look back at his first drawing of Bebop and Rocksteady, that's what made it to the screen. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
So, um, so like, I mean, what was the so with for Turtles, like, what was the challenges of like, I guess taking that sketchy, rough style and bringing it to 2D on a budget, for that matter? Like, what was the challenges of that?
Yeah, I mean, a budget like that was definitely,
Sure.
that's a tough order. You don't want to be seen as like the 90s Disney era where there's the Aladdin feature and then there's the Aladdin TV show. Like, you look at the difference, you're like, "Ah, bummer, you want to be, and I think that was nice about it being
I like
translated.
that show, but yeah, I know what you're
Oh
saying.
no, I love those 90s ones, but like you definitely watch it as a kid, or like when like Prince of Thieves came out, or like the third Aladdin movie, and you're like,
And the Prince of Thieves, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're like definitely dropped the budget went down a little bit here, right?
But for the
Like,
second one, I would say Return Jafar, even because I guess because they didn't even get what's his name, Robin Williams for it. That one, I think that one's even worse than the third one because it is very. I mean, it was made for TV too, but
yeah, yeah,
like it was very rough and very like the colors are just kind of off. Like there's everything off about it seems very like you can feel the budget.
yeah, totally. And I think there's a fear when adapting a movie into that. Like normally, like I worked on Teen Titans Go to the movies, and we kind of went backwards. We got to take a TV show, and then like we got more time with it. We got to kind of push the style a bit more. Like it went like that was the opposite, where you kind of get to pump everything up. But I think by Turtles being a 2D version as opposed to a 3D version, I think that left a lot of room for interpretation and a lot of room to push it. And I think like the Bee Gees, our goal was to feel like the visual development art. But that's a really tough order. Luckily, it's at least on a layout perspective, it's kind of a forgiving style. It's sketchy, it's loose. Like we could get like, you know, you could get pretty like dirty with some of these backgrounds because when you're in a high action moment, the characters are going crazy. Like the characters in the show are amazing. I don't understand how this character team was able to draw these. I don't understand how they were able to animate them because they're just so gorgeous. Because of that, like we're like, oh, there's a huge fight scene going on. Like we don't need to like have this insane background going on right now. Let's like crush the key to make that look amazing, and then kind of let the character action kind of take over a little bit here, I guess.
I mean, I think that kind of answers my next question, but I'm still curious, like when dealing with a style like that where it's rougher and sketchier, is it like, are there actually less steps involved in creating it and rendering it so it actually is rough, or is it just like does just as much perfecting and rendering go into it to make it look not perfect? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot less is seen on the screen in those moments,
Sure.
as opposed to say you're working on a show that's very tight, like a Rick and Morty or something. You're seeing all like the perspective, the rough, the line. It's all kind of being
Oh,
shown
like you
on
go to like Rick
screen.
Atlantis, or like you go to like
Yeah,
the what's the Council of Ricks area,
yeah,
really
exactly.
moving characters on screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're getting all that. And I think in the reverse for Turtles, because it does have a rougher, looser style, there you're still having all the like the storyboards figuring out the character placement and the camera angle. Then you have the layout artist doing all the kind of like perspective and everything and doing a rough to kind of capture that camera movement. But then when it comes time to the cleanup, you can be like, I don't have to be super tight with my line. I can get a little loose with it and get a little like sketchy with it. So I think you actually are like you're losing a lot of that in your cleanup because it is like you're trying to capture a bit more energy and a little bit more aesthetic over perfection. Like trying to catch like if you look in like there's a lot of shots where we're really like stretching and skewing the layout, and it's not like some people will do that in the original rough, but for me, I'll do like a tight perspective drawing and then I'll skew it afterwards to kind of capture that like slight angle change and then do my cleanup on top of it. So it is like kind of reverse engineering it, I guess,
Okay.
like to try and get there, as opposed to just doing like a super like rough drawing from the get-go. Because I think when that happens, you end up losing a lot of that structure. If you're just going for a super distorted, like warped layout, where you're kind of like cutting corners because it's like, oh, there's gonna be a sketchy background. I don't have to put everything in there. It's like, well, you should, and then you should pull back later. So then what few lines are there are informed by like
Hmm.
traditional perspective stuff.
Interesting. Do you have, so you worked on backgrounds, you also said props. Is there any, um, before getting to some of the more backgrounds, I want to go off your Instagram, which is some great stuff. Is
Oh,
there any
thanks.
props that you wanted to bring up that was interesting or tricky, or how do we bring this over? Or
I mean, I oversaw mainly like I oversaw background or props and effects. I didn't have my hands in them
got it.
as much as the design side. So it's kind of like what the designers are doing, then taking a look at it before, everyone else kind of, the EPs, art director, everyone taking a look. The coolest one I will say that I got to like kind of see come to fruition was the motorcycle that eventually got turned into the toy. Like that was really cool and just kind of like because I've never done like a show with toys attached to it like while it's being developed. I've
Okay.
always like the very few times toys have come from a show I've worked on, it's always been much further down the line or it's totally separated from what we were doing. So it was really cool just hearing like, you know, Jack, the main prop designer, going between Alan and Chris and Andrea and like all of them kind of communicating and, all of us putting in our two senses like, oh, what if we made it like kind of red, like do a little Akira thing or like, oh, can we throw a sticker pack in here too? And then everyone could put their own stickers on it. Like, so that was a really like fun new thing. And when I saw that in the store, I was like, oh, I remember when that was just like a sketch. And so, of course, I had to buy it right away.
So the one that came with Raphael?
Yeah, yeah, the
Okay.
Raphael one.
And now backgrounds. So you do, I mean, you worked on So did you work on every scene or certain scenes? How did it work for backgrounds?
So the way we did this show, it was a pretty big team, and we split it up. So it was like team one was on on like even numbers, team two was on odd numbers, and then I kind of was like I was kind of helping out. Once we hit kind of like the mid-season point, I was like focused on one while helping out on kind of all the others going on at the time. Like, as a lead, it sounds exciting, but a lot of times it's like cleaning up the leftovers. It's like, oh, we need to get all these done. There's not enough time. Like, oh, here, I'll slide in real quick and knock these out for everyone real quick so everyone can keep moving forward.
I'd love to talk a bit about the design of the city. I'm curious what you think is unique to like Mutant Mayhem's New York and how you guys found a way to translate that.
It's it's a bit of a shorthand because uh New York City, it's so dense. It's like, I mean, you go there, you if you look through the city, it just goes and it's just details and heaviness. I feel like a lot of cartoons, when trying to translate it, either kind of underplay a lot of the detail, usually underplay the details. You're losing cards and stuff. And what was so nice about Mutant Mayhem was they like really captured the dirt, grit texture of New York City. Like I lived there for a little bit early in my career, and there's something everywhere. There's stuff everywhere. There's pipes, there's tubes, there's signs, there's a bag of trash, there's a box of bottles. Like there's there's so much personality on every street corner. And I love that, Mutant Mayhem really put effort into capturing that instead of like kind of an idolized version of New York City that I feel like you get a lot of times. So when we translate it, that's kind of my bread and butter. I love making things look kind of dirty and grimy and adding signs and bricks and graffiti everywhere and like can get really like silly and fun with it. I think that's what separated Mutant Mayhem apart was kind of capturing the dirtiness. And then when you got to like the really beautiful aspects, like the tops of buildings, you can get pretty simple with it because like that's where kind of paint I think came in really strong. Like
Okay.
where they would, hit all the lighting going on. They would hit like the just the little details. So you're having like the lights on and off, different colors and things. So I felt like layout really like hit the ground level in like our background design, and then paint kind of took all that and then made like I don't know the upper levels, love that like beautiful New York City skyline. So it was a really nice like juxtaposition of like still capturing like idealistic, beautiful New York City where you're like, looking over the bridge at like the skyscrapers, like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. But then you're also seeing like just trash on the ground, a slice of pizza smeared on the sidewalk.
Now, what details are you responsible for when you're designing the backgrounds? Like, is there all those pieces of trash on the ground? Is there the graffiti on the walls? Like, when does all those things come in?
So in this show, what's cool is it's a little bit of both. Like 90, like ideally the layout team is doing any line work, any design, graffiti, trash, all that. Like they're hitting everything. Like if there's a black line around it, odds are they're the ones responsible for it. But then what's sweet about, this amazing paint team is they're like, okay, you put a bunch of graffiti in here. I'm going to put a bunch of graffiti in here too. So then you're like the paint team will go in there and start adding graffiti on top of graffiti and adding like rock texture, or not rock, but like street texture on top of things. So you're like getting this like overlapping level of texture and then the lighting on top of it. And so this one is a really nice like team effort kind of doing both of those things. I always get excited to see what things like Mark and the rest of the paint team added on top of our like design. Like we're like drawing every single brick in a building is kind of crazy, but then
Sure.
paint will do that. Like they'll
Well,
add in like tons more bricks and things on top of like the bricks we already drew because like I don't know how they're doing it, but they found a way to do it just as fast as we do, I guess, using just like paint.
is there like a particular New York location that like I don't know that you wanted to highlight that was either a lot of fun or was really hard or anything?
I mean, I love drawing the sewers. That was like a really
Mm,
cool, that you do on Ninja Turtles. You don't draw sewers like very often on any other show, so
sure,
that made
yeah,
it feel
absolutely.
special. Solin, one of our BG designers, she did this amazing pan, I think in episode 7, or maybe it was 8. I can't remember. But it's the one where it's like I did the start of it where it starts in an alley and the camera trucks down through this alley in kind of a warped perspective and then zooms in on a sewer grate. And then Solin did all the stuff underground of like going through close up of bricks and pipes. So there's like cockroaches going by and rats crawling across things and water dripping everywhere. And then it settles down in the sewers. And like when that shot came together, that was one of those ones where you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like this looks really cool.
Oh, nice. And like, I mean those sewers? I mean, there's a lot of it in the movie, so it must be informed by that. But I don't know if anything else goes into that informing that. Like, is anything else used for reference?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the movie wasn't out at the time, so we got
Oh,
little
right.
bits of stuff, and I think it came out in August, so we still had like half a season left, I think. But like it's not like Nick didn't give us a copy of the movie or anything, so we all went out and saw it, and they're like trying to remember. And I think at some point we got a resource of like screenshots from the movie to help us.
Okay.
But like there were a lot of things I wish we could have seen more of to like inform, like episode 5 where it's all the grates or the storage containers on the dock. I
Okay.
like in the movie there's a shot where they're at a storage container on the dock and we're like, we had just had this. We could have like, kind of matched things up and hooked it up. But we did a lot of prop or a lot of effects, kind of signaling back to the movie as best we could because again they got really sketchy with all their stuff. You could see line work, you could like that. You don't get that in a 3D movie, so capturing that I felt was really important. I remember Andrea wanted to even get like more graphic with the shapes, so like if a fist hits something instead of just like impact marks, it would be like much more graphic shapes to it.
Right.
Kind of that was a big those things were informed it quite a bit. But yeah, even like the city, like we were looking at like we were scrubbing through the trailer a bunch, just trying to capture that texture, that unevenness. Not like we weren't just holding the doing straight lines and then doing like lines for like the tops of buildings with bricks. We're like going in and drawing each brick, but being loose with it because we wanted to capture like the kind of wonky looseness of like the city that the movie did.
The art of book to that movie is really cool because it shows certain things like at street level where the characters would be, like a building would be more rendered in focus and like more like it would have, but as the building would go up it would be more uneven, more sketchy. Like it was an interesting way to do perspective. It wasn't just like getting smaller, it was also like losing its how highly detailed it was and all that. Like it was a really interesting way to that they played with
Yeah, I think that
perspective.
was something we tried to bring. Like, Andrew mentioned it before, but Chris, like the greatest background artist ever, he did those big crazy city shots. Like, he definitely set the tone and look of like all those big cityscapes. The shot of like Central Park with the whole building around it, he hit those and like he, that atmospheric perspective. But what that's usually reserved for paint to kind of let things push back. He kind of set it up to work in line too. And I assume that's kind of what they did with the movie where details were lost, things were getting a lot scribblier. Like there's one shot that he did where it's like this it's a truck down, so we start high in the buildings and we kind of come down, or maybe start low and we go up. But the top of the buildings, if you look, it's just like a rectangle and then straight lines, and then he just erased like in the lines so that each of the so it made like tons of little windows, but it's so sketchy and loose. But then once paint gets into it and you set like the lighting and everything, you're like, oh yeah, there's New York City. It's just like you don't have to overthink it sometimes. Sometimes it is as simple as just lines with gaps in them to make windows. And yeah, like I loved all that. Like I love just how like creative and clever everyone got with kind of figuring out New York City, as opposed to just like while it's more technically difficult to just keep piling on detail and structure and more and more and more, I think there's something to be said about getting there with as few lines as possible or making that work as simply as possible.
The I feel like one location that really stood out to me, and it's weird because you think it's like a kind of straightforward thing, but the bodega looked great. Like
Oh yeah, for
Mikey versus
108, the one with
That sounds right. Where it was Mikey fighting the eel Lee.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites. Yeah, that one's awesome.
It's so like like there's something about that location that really nails it.
Yeah,
Like tons of detail, but also like still within the style. Like, I don't know, something about that whole location. It feels like a lot of work was done in that store.
that was one of Solin and I's episodes, and both of us, she definitely set like she got in there earlier than me and started figuring out the location. And I remember like when we did the handout, she's like, I love this episode. It's so like it was one of her favorites. And I think it shows. I think both of us like had a lot of fun in there. But yeah, like trying to force an action scene in a tiny corner bodega is
Yeah.
such a great idea. Like because you have so many limitations with the room and space, and then yeah, it was a really fun one to figure out. Capture like the fruit cart at the beginning that then falls into the ground. The hole opens up, like the big sinkhole and everything, and then like smashing into the stock room that's now flooded. And then when the electricity comes up and all that lighting hits, like that one is that I think that's my favorite of the season. That's definitely up there.
Mine too. Like I don't know if I like I think I mean I thought both of the villains are great, but I really like the new villains, the fish creatures. Um and yeah, maybe that's mine too. It's a really strong episode. It's a lot of fun and like I said, it feels something very New York about it, which I liked.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's what like I loved about Mutant Mayhem so much is it felt very New York and it also felt like a teen movie, which is like I feel like this is the first time we've done Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like it's always been like an action and they've always felt older, but like these are just straight up teenagers kind of interacting in this world. And I really appreciated that aspect of it. I think that hopefully carried through in the TV show as much as it did in the
Oh yeah.
movie.
I mean, that's one thing that definitely changed it, which I think is like, you kind of take for granted the fact they're teenagers. And with the exception, I think Corey Feldman was like 19 when he played Donatello, I think. But
Oh
like
yeah, I forgot Corey Feldman was
in
Donatello.
the first movie, yeah. But like besides that, everybody's been an adult and it's been wonderful. But like moment Mutant Mayhem starts and you hear those kids' voices and they're kids,
Yeah.
like it makes a huge difference in the tone. Like it automatically made it a very different kind of movie, which I thought was really
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember that first trailer when it came out with the music playing and the vibes of it. You're just like, oh, this is cool. And then I think you mentioned it when you talked to Mark and Andrea, but the no diggity, no doubt sequence in that movie, I think
oh
that's
so
like
good. Yeah.
my favorite moment in cinema. Like
It's so
that
good. I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but I interviewed the guy who storyboarded that, and man, it was like we kind of went through that sequence step by step, and it was really cool. Like that's
yeah.
it's just that like that's the whole movie's great, but that's probably the best scene in the movie. It's a sequence in the movie. It's great.
Yeah, it's just it has so much like such good vibes through that whole sequence.
You also I see a lot of stuff here from the I think it's the last episode of the season where you the turtles are on the cruise ship.
Yeah.
There's any memories from that? Anything that was particularly difficult or interesting about it?
That one was just awesome. Like I was just like you watch that animatic and like that what the board artist did, and it's like hell yeah, like this rules. This fight rules, and I think watching that and the boards like did an amazing job, like kind of capturing how warped and how like stylized things were gonna get.
Hmm.
And it gave us a really good jumping off point. And it was fun because since that was the finale, it was like all hands on deck. Like everyone like jumped into that episode. Each of us had a different location. I think Rodrigo, he was the first one to take a stab at a lot of that. Um, I think Rodrigo and I handled all the boat stuff, but he figured out a lot of that like early stuff. And yeah, it was just really fun. I got to do that one shot where you're looking at the deck and then the camera pans up to the pearl high in the sky in that super warped perspective of
Oh
the
yeah.
boat. And that's like, I think that's like one of my favorite backgrounds we've gotten to do because it's so cool looking. Like that moment, the fight's about to throw down, everything's hype, and you're like, here it goes. It's like, I love that one.
Is it more fun to do something that's like that's supposed to look dirty and rougher, or do you prefer something for your own personal taste? Like, or do you like something that's more polished and perfect looking?
For me, I like the dirty stuff. I feel like I've always been kind of pulled towards that. Lots of te like grime, texture, dirt. I've gotten very lucky in my career where shows have popped up and they're like, we need like a dirty looking layout, like a dirty location, or like we're gonna add a lot of scuff and grime here, and like I've gotten to do that stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely on a huge fan of getting to do like kind of dirty, messier locations and layouts. I think it's fun, and it just fits my sensibility a little bit more. Because sometimes like a super tight, like clean layout, it's like it hits different when you do it, and
Sure.
it's oh, this looks really good. This is like pristine. This looks nice. But just getting to like go in there and add a bunch of grime and dirt, and especially on turtles, all the sketchy marks, like I don't know. I feel like that was like this is like a show that's hitting so hard for me right now that I felt very like happy to get to be on it and get to do like what I like to do. Like this show feels the most in my house probably in like my career.
Oh, wow,
This is like the other one would be Pickle and Peanut. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That one also
I'm
gets
not, but I've heard it's great. I've not seen it. Forgive me.
is one of my that show's awesome. I only worked on season two of it. But we got to do we would rough our backgrounds digitally and then print them out and then use light boxes to then ink them traditionally in washes. So it got to be really messy and gross and dirty looking. And yeah, I feel like that and Turtles kind of weirdly are like in my head are like kind of related, like that same kind of loose sketchiness.
Hmm. Is there any other backgrounds you wanted to point out? I'm looking at these sewer ones now. We talked about those, but like I'm like I've forgotten how cool these look. Like I
Yeah, yeah,
like this.
they're really fun.
Yeah.
There's just like a ton of amazing like work that went into the show. The another one I really liked. I didn't do it, but all the museum stuff like Chris did. That's one of my all
Oh,
time.
sure.
Like that whole location is gorgeous. Was really fun to like us to kind of chat and figure out a little bit because it was weird being like, okay, we're having lasers, but it's flooded and there's like exhibits and all this stuff. So it like got really, a lot going on in there. And then to like get it to work and then paint to get a hold of it and then they do their thing, like that was really fun. That whole sequence in 111 where we're going through the city, that was really fun too, with like Pigeon Pete and Leo, I think. I don't know. All of them going through the city and there's just like oh yeah, they're chasing the one character that travels underground, so it's just ripping up the streets and like
Oh,
things are
sure.
falling to the
Yeah.
ground. Like that whole area was really fun to do, and I love the like overcast look of the city, like
Hmm.
when paint came in. And then the one that I was very nervous to do, but I think worked out, was I did the shot of from the rooftop looking at the museum or looking at the water factory going across the street to the museum where it all flooded. And that
Okay.
was one of those like giant backgrounds where it's like, all right, it's got to look right, but it also has to function right. And yeah, that one that was like another one of my favorites from the season that I'm like will be in my portfolio forever because it's just such a massive like cool background to do. Trying to capture like New York City at that scale, but also kind of making up these like two locations.
Well, yeah, because you also have to catch for the intricate. It's not just the skyline. It's actually capturing the details of what's going on in the story. Because usually
Yeah,
when you pan
exactly.
out in New York, it's almost like a still image.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, it's that still image, but trying to like, set the tone for what's going on.
Sure. Is there a sequence that stands out as the most difficult or a background that was the most difficult that maybe comes to mind?
The one, the sea for at least for me, I think the hardest location was the factory with the robots.
Okay.
On 106. Like that was just such a lot of my job on that one was just figuring out the room and the layout and like boards were like everyone's working together to try to track all these characters and the action and everything happening and there's just so much going on
Sure.
that definitely took a while to like get that done. I was super nervous because I think that was like pretty early. That was like right when I stepped up to being like supervisor because originally came on as like a BG designer and this was like okay, I got to figure this out. Don't screw it up. Not, don't want to get fired on the first like episode you're kind of overseeing. And yeah, that one when that came together and then paint hit it and it was like it all works. It's all functioning. Like this is amazing. Like that was a really that was a good feeling. That
Yeah,
was
you have to. Now, I'm guessing while you're doing the background, you have to factor in that there's going to be 200 robots in this room, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, of course. Like, so it is a little bit of a savior to think like, well, all this is going to be covered, but also you don't want to be the guy that just like,
you need to give them space
just,
to also fight in, right?
yeah, yeah, you got to give them the space to fight in. You want to make sure everything is drawn behind because there's like so much stuff going on that you don't know. Like the camera might track, and then like, oh, this box actually slides to the side. There's nothing behind. Like you got to make sure everything's like figured out, and each wall is hooking up to the next wall. And we're cutting around so much. And then when we do an aerial shot, like, wait, hang on, these characters moved over here now. Like, wait, why did that happen? It's like, oh, they didn't. We're still here. It's just like, sometimes you just kind of lose track of things when you're in each shot to shot, and yeah, it's a lot. That room was a lot. That was definitely like I think the most stressed I was this season, trying to make sure like all those pieces came into place.
Man, my last question for you is, I ask this of everybody, is who's your favorite turtle and why?
I think I'm a Michelangelo. Like I'm a
Okay.
big goofster. I was like younger brother, and I feel like you kind of get drawn to Michelangelo as the younger brother. Um yeah, he's just a big goof and like I love in the third Ninja Turtles movie where he's like a little more like the one where they go back to feudal Japan and he gets a little more like maturity and stuff going on. I'm like, yeah, we're getting some growth from Mikey in this one. This is
Yeah.
good. And like so that one I've always definitely been like a Mikey. After watching it doing Turtles though, I really love Raph in this series, but
Fun. Yeah.
I'm definitely more of a big goofy skateboard guy than I am a serious grumpy dude. Like I'm not a I can't hold that rage like Raph does.
I just want to direct before I let you go, I want to direct everybody to your Instagram. It's Joey MCC. Like a lot of the stuff we're talking about. I'll include some of my posts, but like check it out. There's lots of cool stuff here, a lot more than we're able to talk about. But Joey, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate talking to you. This is cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun. I love talking turtles and cartoons.
All right, man. Thanks so much. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.